they say 6 times the charm. Okay, hello. Something a little different today. Not a review, not a rant about anything. Instead, I have noticed on Booktube, it's not anything new. It hasn't been trending like the past couple of weeks or anything. But certain repeating tropes and videos that do pretty well, but they are a little bit confusing, if not baffling. And one that has immediately caught my attention is the Anti-TBR. And now simply, the Anti-TBR is TBR but in reverse. So rather than to be read, it is, as many of the thumbnails have pointed out, will never read. And that seems very strange for Booktube, because Booktube, as far as I'm aware, is meant to be this place which celebrates reading, celebrates writing, looks to discuss reading, discuss writing, techniques, and the inherent value in literature. And an anti-TBR just states blanketly, I ain't reading these. These aren't being read. I will never read this series, this book. And the justifications for them, do you know what, are valid, because if you don't want to do something, you don't have to do it and your reasoning is fine. But there are some caveats to that. So, first of all, the attitude towards the audience is something I personally don't know anything about, because I don't really have an audience. But it's done in a way that keeps the veneer of Booktube being quite accessible and comforting, with a lot of apologetic language. It's a lot of, I'll do my best not to read. That seems a strange one to say. If you're dead set on not reading something, you just don't read it. Like, for example, I've never read a Percy Jackson book. It's not that I will never read it, I just haven't read it yet. Like, the way I see most literature is, I haven't read it yet. I don't want to ever lump myself off from not reading something, because it seems rather small-minded. What else have we got? It's when they say, I'm sorry guys, or they say, this isn't an insult to, if a book you love is on this list, you don't need to apologize for your opinion is your opinion. So straight away, it seems almost, cowardly is not the right word. It just seems like it's trying to play both sides, saying, I'm never reading these, which is a harsh stance, and then softening it with, I'm so sorry, please, I would, but I can't. And the justifications for the anti-TBRs can be interesting, but the caveats are as such. When people say they won't read it, and then just straight up say why not. Okay, so reasons to not have the TBR, the anti-TBR I should say, is your opinion on it will be more reliable and also have more weight behind it compared to, I didn't read it. So I just spoke about it there. My exposure to Percy Jackson is 0. So my opinion on it is less than someone who has read it. They can discuss it in ways I cannot. I can discuss like the generalizations on it and what little I do know, but until I read the text itself, my critique or praise will not be as valid because I haven't actually done the work to read it. And a book that you see often on these anti-TBRs is like Lolita. Now, a lot of people will have issues with reading Lolita, which is perfectly reasonable because the content can be quite upsetting and can be uncomfortable. But if they're coming from it from the idea of they know precisely what it's about, and because of that content, they don't want to read it, they're missing out on something, because Lolita is actually a really fascinating book about power dynamics and the concept of like evil actions itself. I read it, I think, when I was a teenager, but we had to read it again for university, and it was great. And the reason you read it is because you can then discuss what works about it, what doesn't work about it, but importantly, the discussion with others is what gives it its value. Lolita has more value because it allows you to then contend with what it's talking about and contending with things that pertain to it. But you miss out on that if you just have said, oh, the idea of it gives me the creeps, so it should, but it then allows you to engage better with others, and that might lead to better discussions. Second one, if someone has decided not to read something because it's a second-hand opinion, so your friend has read the book, and they say, hey, you should read this, it's kind of about X, Y, and Z, and you just say, nah, it doesn't appeal to me. You've based that off of the second-hand opinion, but you haven't actually tried it. I'm not saying someone has to read every book, like, here we go. One of my favourite books, like ever, is a textbook, and it's Romanticism, edited by Duncan Wu. Now, anyone like reading literature will at some point get into the Romantics, and this is a wonderful textbook for it. I'm not insisting that everyone who's interested in literature should read this, but if you have got it, you have a broader range of discussion points and resources at your disposal to explain why Romanticism is so important, and also explain why textbooks can be in and of themselves really good reading. And it's not just second hand, you've done your own. And biggest issue though kind of pertains to the size of that piece there, was something being too long. Now, I can understand being intimidated by a book. A textbook is quite intimidating, but you're not really meant to read them like a novel. You're meant to read the passages that pertain to what you're studying. But where's Middlemarch? There it is. Middlemarch is a big book. It's 825 pages, excluding the appendices. And the reason because this Moby Dick and War and Peace always show up on these things as being too long. But Booktube usually is quite happy to talk about like 800-page slogs. But I actually think it's not anything to do with page size. I actually think it's to do with page density. That's a page from Middlemarch. As you can see, the text is quite small. There's a lot of it, and the text itself is complicated. It has a broad range of characters, same as War and Peace. War and Peace is also a little bit more intimidating because it's dealing with the Napoleonic era, particularly Russia. So the names can be a little bit cumbersome unless you're used to it. But it's being put off by these because the length seems very shallow. I understand people don't have all the time in the world. I certainly don't. I don't subscribe to that 30 books a month nonsense. But that's why these swallow you. These are like the one focus you have, and it's useful. Like, for example, in Middlemarch, nominally you're following Dorothea and Will Ladislaw, but there's a massive cast of characters, and you're not always going to be following the principals or even the characters you like. And that's great because it actually gives you experience in characterization and understanding different techniques and writing styles for those characters. And being put off by length or by preconceived notions of canon, particularly whenever you hear anybody saying, I don't want to read stuff written by old white men. Understandable that you could be annoyed at the lack of diversity in canon, but the canon's actually pretty big. Toni Morrison is one of the foundational members of the modern canon, and beloved being chosen as in the contending for being the best book ever written. And you're dismissing classics, or long classics, I should say, because of the times and because it might not appeal to your sensibilities. You're losing the point of the canon. The canon was to give everybody a base of literature, and then it builds on it. Canon is always being added to. That's the biggest accomplishment of it. And now I'll go through the TBR tags themselves, because the anti-TBR tag, despite seeming small-minded, does have wonderful tags. The tags in it are all like really good discussions, but they're always about not reading. When it just seems shallow. I can understand like a book. I can't dictate how people read, and certainly I wouldn't. But not finishing something, I would always power for it because it might pick up, and if it doesn't, it allows you more evidence on why X didn't appeal to you. So the first tag is a popular book everyone loves that you have no interest in reading. That's like a really good discussion. Like, what's a popular book that everyone loves? But rather than that you have no interest in reading, it could be tweaked to that you didn't like. Brilliant. Now, I don't read a lot of contemporary works just because I don't buy a lot of books, and if I do buy books, they're ones I like. So my exposure is limited, but you're cutting yourself off from a popular book, and you're also cutting yourself off from like the reading habit and the culture by going through with this first one. So weirdly small-minded. A classic book or author you don't have an interest in reading. I kind of covered that with the canon. This has shown though that another popular one is The Catcher in the Rye. The Catcher in the Rye is often misunderstood because there's three stages. There's three stages to The Catcher in the Rye. You read it as a teenager and think it's brilliant. It's funny and stupid. You read it again as an adult, you realise it's really stupid, and then you read it again as an adult, and you realise that there's value in it, but it's also, in many ways, quite an immature book. But it's still a great classic. And with this, I'm never reading it, don't want to read them. You're cutting yourself off from a different point of view and a different way of thinking. A problematic author, kind of interesting one, but I've read like books by people that problematic isn't the right term for. Just straight up horrible people, monstrous people. But their books do have value in what the content is, because it allows you to know more about that person, and also what the wrong view is. Like when you read the Turner Diaries, you're not reading the views and beliefs of someone who makes any sense. You're reading the views and beliefs of someone hateful, and you're able to point to that in their failings. It's a useful tool to have. But of course, depending on your sensitivity, you could feel bad about supporting an author that's beliefs are antithetical to you. But again, you're not quite supporting them. In fact, good chances you're more supporting the publisher, or you're supporting the brick and mortar store, hopefully. Or you just get it from the library, and then there's not that worry. An author you've read a couple of books from and decided the book's not for you. I kind of understand this one and close to agree with it. There's many books I've read by authors that I don't gel with, and I keep trying them over and over again, and they're never working. But that's the optimist in me, because I'm hoping the next one's great. A genre you have no interest in, or a genre you tried to get into and couldn't. I don't gel with this one, mostly because I will read anything. the two books that are like most out of place on my Goodreads are The Flat Share and probably Vicious. Excuse me. Yeah, The Flat Share and Vicious. And neither of them really are the types of books I'm into, because Booktube is dominated mostly by fantasy, sci-fi, and YA isn't a genre, but it's a marketing genre, and they don't, none of them appeal to me, but I won't cut myself off from it, because if I cut myself off from these, I might lose the ones that are good. Rather than like pegging yourself as a reader of a certain genre, it's better to be open to whatever. And I can understand not getting into it. So, Flat Share is normally a romance, and I didn't like it, but I got to see the trappings and the possibilities of that genre, and now I'm very open to trying one that will work for me. Same with Vicious. Didn't work for me at all, but it doesn't mean that the next one might not work. A book you've bought but will never read. Can't really flex with this. This seems to be a problem for people that do hauls, and I don't do hauls. Every book I buy, it's because I have either read it and liked it, or I'm very, very confident that I will like it. Series you have no interest in reading, or series you starred and have DNF. You don't quite know until you try. Like, I'm already on it. So, Vicious is a series. I haven't read the rest of them just because I haven't got round to it, but I haven't against reading more. And I always finish a book, because the thing is, Vicious could get better. Like, for all I know, the second book is so much better, and it takes all the problems I had with Vicious and it makes them so much more interesting. But if I'm just going with this, then I won't know. A new release that you have no interest in reading. I'm quite bad on keeping up to new releases, and with the library being closed, the best I can do is I have a friend who buys a lot more books than I do, and she gets a lot more new stuff. So I sometimes ask her what's new, and this is kind of similar to the culture one. If you just blanket going no to a new release, you're not being as informed of what is tracking and selling right now. So that's it. The Anti-TBR. Strangely small-minded. Not judging anyone that does it, obviously, but feels like something for Booktube to be wildly out of place. I quite enjoyed finding out about the anti-TBRs though. They're fascinating to watch because, as far as I'm aware, it allows me to like gauge the reading taste of the people doing them, and it also gives you like weirdly some really good recommends. So I enjoyed this trope thing. Because I do like Booktube videos as much as they annoy me. I do like them. So I think my next one will be on bookshelves themselves, because they are fascinating to look at, especially as someone who lives a awful gremlin existence without a bookshelf, and it lets you know a little bit more about the person doing it. So thank you for watching.